Hello, class. Today we are very pleased to welcome a distinguished and a unique guest, Dr. Nadeau, as our speaker to our class. Dr. Nadeau is currently the executive director of Fulbright, Taiwan. Fulbright, is a well-known institution that dedicated to supporting scholarly exchange around the world. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about Fulbright and how we may mutually benefit from your hard work later on. But before this position, Dr. Nadeau was a professor of religion at Trinity University for 25 years, and he was a Fulbright scholar to 东海大学, I think around 2014 or 15, right? And I think through this experience, he developed a strong connection to Taiwan, and he's able to speak and understand Mandarin. So, 我现在就用中文介绍，好，比较容易。好，终于那大家可以看到，我们Professor Nadeau 他的这个领域专长，其实都跟我们这个亚洲还有跟这个文化层面很像的哈。他也出版了很多的这个专书，在这个学界是相当颇负盛名。我们再下一章。那今天呢，这边就有讲了很多他的过去的经验哈。我比较 surprise 是也对这个迷幻摇滚天团这个我是完全没有完全不懂的不过那时候他很有涉猎的非常广。那今天呢，他是要来跟我们讲一个非常特别的题目，叫做isn't in a gene or is it the science of happiness？ 我想这是一个我们现在大家都很关心的，好，大家的这个 well-being 到底它是被什么东西所影响？但是我更好奇的是，我们大家真的都要怎么从这个跨文化的观点从他自己的这个专长里面来跟我们来谈这些事情哈。那相信一定很精彩，所以我们就一起欢迎Dr. Nadeau。
Thank you, thank you. Hello, everyone. You have a worksheet, and I'd like you to write some notes on it while I'm talking, okay? Because I have some questions for you. And some of these questions you can do with the person sitting next to you. So this can be kind of paired together. So today we're going to be talking about happiness. And I've taught a course on happiness now in 3 countries. I've taught the course in the US and in Japan, and here in Taiwan. And I've noticed something very interesting. As you might expect, there are cultural differences in the ways that people think about happiness. But in terms of how many people are actually happy, there's not much cultural difference. So there's something built into us that makes us happy or unhappy. So for now today we're going to look at the question of DNA and happiness. Is our happiness determined by our genes? Or, in other words, is there a physical dimension to mental well-being? Okay, so we're going to look at this question, and I want you to take some notes. But I'd like to start with a different question. And maybe you could discuss this for a minute with the person sitting next to you. And the question is, why do Olympic swimmers have long arms? Why do Olympic swimmers have long arms? Okay, you got it, right? Do you think their arms grew longer because they were swimming? Probably not, right? They were probably born with long arms. Do all people with long arms become Olympic swimmers? No, probably not. But it is true that Olympic swimmers have long arms. Okay, we'll answer that question later. I'll ask you a different question. What is the most popular sport in Europe?
Football.
Football, that's right. Okay. 2 times as many professional football players in Europe were born in January than December. Why? And by the way, equal number of people in the general population are born in January and December. Equal number. But 2 times as many professional football players in Europe were born in January, right? Than December. Okay, we'll come back to that later. Okay, so today I want to talk about a few things. First of all, basically all under the category of the relationship between the body and the mind. What is the biological basis for happiness? And what is the relationship between happiness and our physical bodies? So, what are some positive outcomes of happiness for physical health? That's B. And what we'll see is that happy people are healthier than unhappy people. Happy people are healthier than unhappy people. I didn't say healthy people are happier than unhealthy people. I said happy people are healthier than unhappy people. Happy people live longer than unhappy people. Happy people don't get sick as often as unhappy people. Happy people recover from wounds faster than unhappy people. Happy mothers have better, healthier babies than unhappy mothers. So there's a relationship between happiness and physical health. But also we're going to see this goes in both directions, so that healthy people are happier than unhealthy people. Okay, so that'll be C. Then D, we're going to talk about some physical activities that you can do to increase your happiness. Because being happy is a good thing. It feels good to be happy, but it's also good for your health, right? So the reason why I teach this course on happiness is because most people want to be happier. And every time I teach this course, and I call it in Taiwan 幸福学, every time I teach it, lots and hundreds of students want to take the class. They don't know me, they just see the title of the class. Everyone wants to be happier, right? So I'm going to give you some ideas about how to be happier. Then we're going to look at E, comparative surveys on happiness and health, focusing on Taiwan. And then finally we get to the question F, do our genes determine our physical and mental health? Are we born to be happy or unhappy? And then finally G, some other relationships between our bodies and our minds, and then some closing thoughts on creating our own happiness. So that's what we'll be doing today. And let's look at this first, the general question of the relationship between physical health and mental health. We usually think that happiness is a kind of a feeling, right? An emotion that basically, well, we talk about our hearts, but we don't really feel happiness in our hearts, do we? We feel it in our minds, right? Happiness is a mental state. But is happiness headless? Could its causes be physical? So first question, I want you to discuss with yourselves, what does this mean, the word physical? What does it include? when we say, could its causes be physical, what would physical include? Please write down a few words on the sheet of what is physical. And some examples of physical things. Or maybe we think this way, what physical activities make you feel happier? Make you feel good? Write some down. Okay, so sure, there are ways that we move our body that makes us feel happy. We go outside, we do exercise, we sleep. Did anyone write sleep? One of the keys to happiness is sleep. One of the reasons that university students are unhappier than other people is because they don't get enough sleep. And of course, minds are brains, right? So there's a relationship between our brains and our happiness. Hormones, DNA, our genes, right? So a lot of things we see and we don't see that are physical. So what is the impact of these physical things on our emotions? So here's the first thing I want you to write down. 6 things on your list to write on the sheet about the benefits of happiness for health. So write these down. So these are based on scientific studies done by professors, by scholars, medical professionals, who interview hundreds or thousands of people and study the impacts of emotions on physical health. And this is the result of these studies. And many, many studies show the same results. That people who are happy are healthier in all of these different ways. Right? Their hearts are better. And heart rate variability means sometimes their heart beats slow, sometimes it beats fast. Happy people have greater variation in their heart rates than unhappy people do. Stronger immune systems means they don't get sick as often as unhappy people. And they recover from illness more quickly than unhappy people. They practice good health behaviors. Happy people eat better. They drink more water. They exercise more than unhappy people. They have better sex, more enjoyable sex, and healthier babies. And they live longer. It makes sense, right? If you've ever been unhappy, or if you are unhappy, if you're depressed, what is it that one thing that we notice about people who are depressed is what? They sleep longer, they stay in bed longer. There are some kinds of depression that are so severe, so serious, that people don't want to get out of bed, right? This is a natural reaction. When we're feeling sad or unhappy, we have a tendency to close in, right? And just put the covers over our head. So unhappy people are less active. So we know that there's a cause and effect relationship here. Think of happiness as A and these 6 things as B. A causes B. And it's very interesting that happiness would have this effect. So if you visit your grandmother or your grandfather who's getting old and maybe have some health issues, I think one of the most important things you can do for them is make them happier, right? A friendly visit and chat with your elderly grandmother is the best medicine for her. She'll feel happier and she'll live longer Okay. So we know there's this correlation, actually a causal relationship between the mental state and the physical state. So there's cause and effect. Feelings of happiness, life satisfaction, well-being produce certain behaviors and physical outcomes. Okay? And by the way, we didn't really discuss what happiness is, but for now, let's not worry about it. We all know the feeling of being happy. Okay, but what we also notice is that the relationship moves in the other direction as well. So it's not just cause and effect, but also correlation. Meaning that, just like I said at the beginning, it goes both ways. So if we do healthy behaviors, we will also feel happier. It's a positive loop between the emotions and physical response, a positive loop. So one of the first things that we're going to notice is that, if we can make an effort to do those things, like get our heart beating, the heart rate variability, right? That's going to make us feel happier. If we do more exercise, if we drink more water, if we eat better food, if we get outdoors, all these things are going to have positive effects. So it's a kind of cause and effect that goes in a positive loop. So what are some things that you can do to make yourself happier? Write down these 8 things. I want you to write them down because I want you to remember them and I want you to do them. Okay? So write down these 8. I'll just talk about a couple of these. Heart rate variability means getting your heart beating faster, right? That's from aerobic exercise, which would include playing basketball or running or doing other things that get your heart beating faster. What's nice to know is that medical studies show that if we do this for only 5 minutes a day, it makes a huge difference to our physical health. If you can just get your heart beating for 5 minutes a day, that's going to have a huge impact on your health. Okay, so that's good. Sleep, I'll talk about again in a little bit. Water, how much water should you drink? I'll talk about that in a minute. These things all increase happiness. Spending time outdoors. Some of these things are so obvious, but we forget about them. Do you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Did you ever have an argument? And when you have an argument or you're unhappy, you kind of, close in like that. If you ever have an argument with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, I have one piece of advice. You think this sounds really stupid. I want you to go outside and touch a tree. It's going to make you feel a lot better. Just go outside and touch a tree. We spend more time outdoors. We interact with nature. It increases our hormonal levels of happiness and reduces cortisol, which causes stress. Smiling. You would say, wait a minute, we smile because we're happy. When I feel happy, I smile. How could it be the other way around? Be an actor for me. Pretend you're an actor, and in the scene, you have to smile. Okay, now everybody in this room, everyone, even ones playing on your phone, smile. Push your cheeks up, smile. Believe it or not, this actually makes you feel happier. It actually does. Like scientists study this. We force ourselves to put our cheeks up, we actually feel happier. So it's not just that we smile because we're happy. We can also feel happy because we smile. And then chatting with friends. Now you would say, now wait a minute, is that a physical activity? I chat with my friends, it seems more like an intellectual activity, right? But it actually takes physical effort to chat with someone. So it's another nice way to deal with your unhappiness. You get up, you go out, or you lift your mouth, move your mouth, right? Speaking words, it lifts your mood. Doesn't even matter what you're talking about. You don't have to talk about your unhappiness. Talk about anything. It lifts your mood. So chatting is a kind of physical activity. I mean, moving the air through our throats, right? Our mouth, that makes us feel happier. Okay, so the point of all this is that we have correlation, causality in two directions. Happiness leads to positive health outcomes, and positive health activities lead to positive mental or psychological outcomes. Okay? Causation in both directions. A little bit more about sleep. Oh, here's a note about water. This is how much water you should be drinking. Actually, you guys are pretty good about water. I always tell myself every year I need to drink more water, and my doctor says drink more water. But I think college students now are pretty good about this. But there's the health guidelines for how much water you should be drinking. And what I found useful for myself is I actually write down how much water I drink every day. So I fill up my big bottle and say, I'm going to drink all of that. Do you do that? No, you should. You should. It's going to make you much healthier and happier too. Okay, and what about sleep? Okay, I want to say something about sleep because you guys don't sleep enough and you don't sleep well. First of all, this is more for Americans than Taiwanese. American students drink too much alcohol. And I'm not saying this because I think it's wrong. I'm not like that. I like to drink alcohol myself. But it's bad for my health. And it's especially bad if I'm drinking it late. Because alcohol is a depressant, meaning depressant in the sense not that it makes me depressed, but it makes me sleepy and tired. So people who drink a lot in the evening get sleepy. And sometimes people even drink to sleep. In other words, they want to go to sleep, so they drink. But it produces very bad sleep. You go to sleep. You have to. It's impossible to drink a lot and not sleep. It has that effect on the brain. So people who drink alcohol in the evening fall asleep. But sleep, healthy sleep, has cycles. You probably learned about this before, right? The cycles of sleep through the night. And alcohol interrupts those cycles. So that's why you wake up in the morning, even if you think you slept all night, the quality of the sleep was not adequate, and that's why people have a headache in the morning if they drank too much. So don't drink too much, especially at night. And then don't say, oh, I can drink coffee in the evening, because it does the same effect. It affects the quality of your sleep, even if you are able to go to sleep after drinking coffee. So don't drink coffee after 4 p.m. But for you, the main reason that you can't sleep is because of worry, anxiety, and stress. Have you ever had that happen to you? I think everyone in this room, right? Sometimes you go to sleep, but then you wake up in the middle of the night, or you can't get to sleep because you're worried about something. And this worrying is a mental activity, right? Your mind is very busy worrying. And that's why you can't sleep. And it's very inefficient mental activity. Because have you ever noticed that when you can't sleep because you're worrying about something, have you ever noticed that the same thoughts just keep repeating? You're not going from A to B. It's kind of a loop. And it kind of just goes around and around and around. It keeps your mind busy, but you're not achieving anything. You're not coming any closer to a solution. So it's unproductive thinking, as well as unpleasant thinking. So don't worry at night. Well, how can you stop it? You say, sure, Dr. Nadeau, I don't want to worry. And the more you worry, and then you can't sleep, and then you start worrying about tomorrow, because you got so much to do tomorrow, right? And it gets worse and worse. And you get into this cycle, okay? So what we need to do is to train our minds to sleep. And that's what these things are here. These are ways that we need to train our minds to sleep, because I'm telling you, sleep is really important. And getting enough sleep is important to you. You'll be better students, and you'll be happier, and you'll be healthier. So you need to build these habits now, when you're young, because they will continue, okay? It's very normal to lose sleep through worry. So don't blame yourself for it. Everybody does it. But there are ways that we can train our minds so that we'll worry less at night. And these are some of the sleep habits that I want you to do. Okay? It doesn't help to have, ideally you're going to get the same number of hours of sleep every night, which is 7 to 9. 7 to 9 hours. Depends on your body. It's not so helpful to sleep sleep until noon on Saturday and then catch up on your sleep. It's better to wake up at the same time every morning. It's better to go to bed at the same time every night. And don't read your phone to go to sleep. That's the worst thing that you can do. Try to finish with your phone before you get into bed. Sleep experts say that the bed should only be used for two things: having sex and sleeping. That's it. So for you, one thing. It should be for sleeping. That's why you should follow the 20-minute rule. The 20-minute rule is, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to sleep, limit it to 20 minutes, okay? Don't toss and turn for 2 hours. After 20 minutes, get out of bed. Get out of bed. I know it's not easy if you live in a dormitory with roommates, but get out of bed and go to your desk. Do something. Read, do homework, play with your phone, it's okay, but not in the bed. Get out of bed after 20 minutes, do something else, and then when you feel sleepy, go back to bed. This is to train your mind that beds are for sleeping. Okay? Beds are for sleeping. Lying down is for sleeping. So this is a kind of conditioning of your mind. And it takes time, but you'll be training your mind to associate the bed with sleep. And it'll make you sleepier when you lie in bed. Okay, so these are all things that I recommend to you for your mental and physical well-being. Okay, I want to turn to an interesting survey. I'll just go through this briefly. The World Values Survey. There's a website called World Values Survey. You should check it out. You can use it for any of your classes. If you're in political science, sociology, anything in intercultural relations, education, World Values Survey is a very, very interesting resource, and it's an open resource. So you go and Google World Values Survey, get in there. They've done 7 surveys. Each survey is done every 5 years, so it's been about 35, 40 years now. They've been doing these international surveys, and they go to many, many countries, and they interview thousands of people. And you can use the World Values Survey, and Taiwan is included. And you can use this in any way you want to. You can look at questions about politics, about values, about attitudes, even happiness is included. And then you can compare countries. It's a really good resource. So anyway, I just was looking at the relationship between health and happiness for all countries, and then for Taiwan. And what you notice on this is a little bit of a difference between Taiwan and other countries around the world. You see this difference? So what they asked, first of all, was about the, the health. Okay, the relationship between health. So people who said that their health, this is for all countries, people who said that their health was very good, 96% of them said they were happy. Okay? And then you go across, and people who said their health is very poor, only 39% said that they were happy. 60% said that they were unhappy. Okay? But if you look at Taiwan, it's a little bit different, right? So people in Taiwan who said they were had very good health, 99% of them were happy. But if you look at people in Taiwan who said their health was very poor, even 52% of them said they were happy. That's the biggest difference, right? The very far right. People who say their health is very poor. So what does this mean? Does it mean that people in Taiwan are happier? Does it mean that they are healthier? We certainly see a correlation, or a difference, I should say, for people who say that their health is very poor. Those people who have very poor health tend to be happier in Taiwan than other countries. Why is that? I don't think we'll get into that right now, but it does show that there is a cultural or social dimension to happiness too, right? And in the course that I teach on happiness, we look at the social dimensions, political dimensions of happiness. And you probably saw the World Happiness Report that just came out a few days ago. That's from the United Nations, where Taiwan was ranked, I think it was 28th or something in the world, which is not bad out of 160 countries, and first in Asia. We passed Singapore. We were second last time, 2 years ago. Singapore was number one, but now we're number one in Asia. Okay, so I won't go into this anymore, but there is a social or political dimension to health and happiness too. All right, now let's turn to genetics. So we've been talking about our physical body, right? And physical health and so on, but now let's get to the genes. The question now is going to be, I mean, we can't change our genes, basically, right? We're born with them. It's our DNA. So the question is now, do our genes determine our physical and mental health? Am I fated to be healthy or unhealthy, happy or sad? Because if I am, if it's all in the genes, then there's nothing I can do to make myself happier, right? So what we want to see is what's the proportion of our happiness or our health that's determined by our genes, that depend on, how we were born, or the conditions of our birth, the genetic conditions of our birth, right? So this is a key question. And yeah, if we find out that it's all genes, that would be kind of depressing, right? Because then we can't do anything about it. If we're feeling unhappy, it's just in our genes. What can I do? Nothing, right? But it's not going to be all genes. But a significant part is. So let's look at the results of these studies. So the most interesting way that the scholars investigate this question is by twin studies, and specifically studies of twins who were separated at birth. So they're looking at identical twins who share the same DNA, basically 99.5% if you're identical twins. And then because of adoption or other circumstances were raised in different families. Those are very interesting people to study for research on genetic influence on health and happiness. And a surprisingly large number of people like this that scholars can study. By the way, do we have any twins in the room? Not actually, but are you a twin? Doesn't look like it. I'm not going to ask you anything. I was just curious. No twins in the class. Okay. Well, we're going to be looking at the twins who are raised apart. And we find in these twins raised apart, raised in different families, different environment, right? Different parents, that we find remarkable similarities in adulthood regardless of the family environment or schooling or anything. In their appearance, their dress, their speech, mannerisms, the way they move when they talk, and the length of their lifespan and their emotions, their happiness or depression. And what's even more interesting about this is that the older they get, this is the weird thing, the older they get, like these are children in the photo, right? But the older they get, even though they're growing up in very different circumstances, the older they get, the more similar they become. That's a very interesting thing. So let's look at some examples of this. So first one is about longevity, about how long people live. So this is a major study that was done in Denmark, looking at almost 3,000 Danish twin pairs. And they found that about 1/4 of the reason for their lifespan length is determined by DNA. So 25% is genetic, how long you live. And we know this from the twin studies of people born in different environments, live different kinds of lives, that about 25% of prediction, the predictability of how long they will live, 70 or 80 or 90, is based on DNA. And that would be true, if it's true for them, it's true for everyone. So it's true for us too. How long I will live, I can't control 25% of it. Which means I can control 75% of it, right? So if I exercise, eat well, do healthy things, that's certainly going to help me live longer. Get medicine, have access to health care. All those things are important. But not all 100%. 75% is under the control of my environment or my own activities, okay? So, but I think this is a very important study and it's kind of a starting point. So write this on your worksheet, 25% for longevity is determined by DNA. One of the really interesting That was a Danish study. One of the most interesting laboratories in the United States is the Minnesota Center for Twin and Family Research. This is probably the biggest study, one of the biggest studies in the world of twins, especially twins raised apart. This center started in the 1950s, so they have about 70 years history now, studying twin pairs. And they do a lot of studies. They do studies of twins who are raised together. They do studies of twins as children, twins when they grow up. They bring twins into their laboratory every 5 years and have done this now for 60 years. There are twins they have worked with for many, many years. They also bring twins together who have never met each other and do studies of them. It's a very fascinating research center. And the results are quite fascinating. We talked a minute ago about long life. What about intelligence? What about IQ? This study was done 25 or 30 years ago. It was kind of the first major study that the Minnesota Center did. It was this article called Sources of Human Psychological Differences, the Minnesota Study of Twins Reared Apart. And the leader of this study was a man named Tom Bouchard. And they did these studies. They had 100 pairs of twins for this study. And they examined these twins' IQ, their intelligence. How smart were they? How did they perform on IQ tests? And they tested them in adulthood, not in childhood. So after their brains were fully developed. And they found that 70% of intelligence is based on DNA. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? 70% of how smart you are has nothing to do with how much you study, how well you do. I mean, well, of course it affects how well you do in school, but like the effort that you put in. Your basic intelligence is something that you were born with. So, if it's true for twins, it's true for all of us, right? So I don't know how this makes you feel. When I first saw this, I was a little bit disappointed. Because I thought, man, just, you know, I'm as smart as I can be, and I can't get any smarter, right? Basically, 70% is a lot. That means that if you're dumb, you know, you can study more, but it's not going to make you smarter. It'll make you more knowledgeable, and it shows spirit, but it's not really going to make you smarter. And the more I thought about this, I thought, well, you know, in a way, okay, one has to accept oneself as we are, you know? There's an idea in actually a lot of religions, because I used to teach about religion. It's an idea in Christianity and in Buddhism, and that is that if you want to love someone, if you want to love like your girlfriend or boyfriend, you want to love someone, you want to love others, first you have to love yourself. And loving yourself means accepting your limitations, being at peace with yourself. So I think we need to be at peace with ourselves a little bit about intelligence. Doesn't mean we should stop working or stop studying, because we can always improve, but we can't get past that 70% that's determined by our genes. Okay, so longevity was 25%. Intelligence is 70%. That's a big difference, right? Why do you think there is this difference? What's the difference in longevity, how long we live, and how smart we are? Well, 25% longevity means there's 75% that we do have control over, right? So for longevity, yeah, doing healthy things and seeing doctors and taking medicine, those are things we can control, right? So we need to do those things. For intelligence, we can't change how smart we are, but we can change how much knowledge we have. We can still learn by studying. Okay, now let's turn to some other things. So, what about those psychological characteristics? You know, intelligence is like just one characteristic, right? IQ. But what about things like our hobbies, or the way we dress, things that we're interested in? Like if we're interested in sports or in ballet, or if we're interested in science, or if we're interested in poetry. Are these things related to our genes? And the Minnesota study found some amazing similarities. So like, for example, these two men were twins separated at birth. They met for this first time at age 31. Before that, they were raised apart, and they did not know that they had a twin. They did not know this. And they finally met at age 31, and of course they look alike, don't they? Interesting choices they made. I mean, same facial hair, right? That they chose. I mean, they didn't know, they didn't plan this, right? And here's, I love this. Both twins were volunteer firefighters. There are not many of those volunteer firefighters, you know, 1 in 1,000, maybe? And they had both chosen this to do. One of the most interesting aspects of this is the China twin studies. About 20 to 25 years ago, the Chinese government was trying to deal with one of the problems with the one-child policy, right? They had the one-child policy. Remember that? Which meant that there were a lot of cases where baby girls were abandoned because people wanted boys. And a lot of these, or not a lot, but a certain number of these cases were cases of twins, especially twin girls. And so a professor named Nancy Siegel decided to do a study of these twins, because when they were adopted, and they were adopted by American and European families, and these families, this was around this period, between 2000 and 2005 was the biggest number of them. So people who are now about 20 years old, who were adopted by these usually white families. And I still remember this because I happened to be living in China at this time. And there were planes, big planes of parents coming over. And they came to Guangzhou, and they came to, it was mostly in Guangzhou, and then along the coast up to Shanghai. And they would come in these planes and take these babies back to the US or to Europe. And the policy was to separate the twins. So these twin girls were separated basically at birth and raised apart. So Nancy Siegel, a professor, decided to do this study, and she's been doing this study now for 10 or 15 years of these girls, especially ones raised in the US. And by the way, just if I go back here for a second to this slide, if you notice the authors of this study, which this study is one of the early ones, 1990. And you notice Tom Bouchard was the lead examiner, the lead scholar, but at the bottom there you see Nancy Siegel. She was a graduate student at this time at the University of Minnesota, and then she went on and now she's a professor. I forget where she's a professor now, but anyway, she did this study of the Chinese adoptions. And this is a very huge study because it's a surprisingly large number of twins. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of a brief video. And before you see it, what you're going to see is this is a kind of like a popular morning television show, like a news show that people watch in the morning. And it's a reunion, or the first time actually, that these two 10-year-old girls met each other. What's interesting about this case is that around their first 5 years of life, the parents did not know that their child was a twin. But then when they were around 5 or 8, the parents discovered that they had a twin. So that was a kind of a shock to the parents, right? And then they arranged for the two girls to meet each other. And this became kind of a thing in the news. And what you're going to see is the girls meeting each other for the first time. They've been told about each other, and I believe they even spoke on the phone, but they had never actually met each other until this moment. And I want you to notice their reaction to meeting each other and the kinds of words they use to describe this experience of meeting their twin for the first time. You notice one thing that I found, oh, and I just realized they only knew this 1 year ago, she said, 1 year before. One thing that I thought was interesting was that the father said about, I guess her name is Audrey, that when the parents told her she had a twin, she said that it was overwhelming. She used the word overwhelming, he said. And then did you notice that Gracie used exactly the same word when she came in? And this is a very, kind of not a word that many 10-year-olds know, that word overwhelming. So I think it's quite interesting that they use the same word. By the way, this was from 10 years ago, this video. And now these twins are YouTubers, so you can check them out online and see the YouTube videos that they make together. Okay, so you saw from this, that there's this whole academic field about the study of twins separated at birth, especially these China adoptees. And by the way, I run a scholarship program here in Taiwan. It's called Fulbright, and sometime I can tell you, or I can bring my staff to tell you how to apply for a Fulbright scholarship. You can go to the US to do a master's degree or a PhD, and we pay for everything. We also bring Americans to Taiwan, and we have a big English teaching program, a very large one. We have 200 Americans who are just graduated from university in Taiwan now teaching English in the Guoxiao and Guozhong. And this year we have 16 out of the 200 are China adoptees, American citizens who were born in China and grew up in the US. So we have 16 of them teaching English in Taiwan this year. I won't show you the video for this one, but probably even a more amazing story was this one, a story of 3 identical strangers And in this particular case, these three met for the first time. They were triplets separated at birth, grew up in different families. They discovered each other by accident. The parents did not know that their son was a triplet. And what happened was one of them was they were raised, different families, different parts of the U.S., and the U.S. is a big country. And there are lots of universities in the U.S. I think it's something like 3,000. You have 150 here, and we have 3,000 colleges and universities. So one of them was in his second year of university, is walking on the campus, and someone shouted to him, "Hey, Henry, hey, Henry." And he said, "My name's not Henry." Anyway, he had a twin attending the same university. And then this was a story in the news, and it got on like the US news. These two twins discover themselves at the same university. And the guy was watching, and he thinks, "I think I'm the third." He wasn't at the same university, but he saw the thing on television. So then they meet together. And the reason I wanted to describe these three is because all three of them suffered from depression. And that's the genetic link between genes, at birth, and happiness and unhappiness. And this has been discovered in other twin studies too. Similarities in the way they speak, the words they use, the way they wear their hair, the glasses they wear, the way they move, but also their emotions. Their emotional outlook on life is remarkably similar, despite how they were raised by their parents, how much they were loved by their parents, or how mean their parents were. It didn't matter. Their levels of happiness and depression were remarkably similar. Okay, so the question now is, we looked at long life, we looked at intelligence, IQ. What about happiness? Is happiness inherited? And for this, I looked at 3 studies. These are the 3 studies, and these are meta-studies on the heritability of happiness. Okay, so what is heritability? That means how much is determined by DNA, right? Is heritability. Echon, it's just how much comes from your DNA. And what is a meta-study? A meta-study is a study of studies. It's a research paper about research papers, okay? So when you get to do your master's degree, you will do a thesis, right? And part of your thesis will be a literature review. And in the literature review, you summarize a lot of research that's already been done. And then you're going to do more research, right? But first you need to see what has already been done. So a literature review, you read 30 articles and you summarize them. That's what a meta-study is. So these meta-studies looked at many studies that were already done and summarized them. Okay, so what do we find out from these meta-studies? Basically, that there was a range between, about 30% and 40% of the studies concluded that 30 to 40% of our happiness is determined by DNA. Happiness, depression, the range of well-being that we have is determined by DNA. So 30 to 40%. When I first thought about this, I mean, it's kind of like longevity. You know, we found longevity was 25%, IQ was 70%, happiness is 30 or 40%, right? Yeah, so that means that there's 30 or 40% of my, feelings I can't do anything about. There's nothing I can do about that 30 or 40%. I can't make my DNA happier. It's where it is. So at first I was disappointed in that. I thought, oh, I wish I had more control. I want full control. But we don't have full control over our emotions. But also then I realized too, okay, that's my condition, but I can build on the rest. Because it means I've got 60 or 70% that I can control. 60 or 70% that is based upon my conditions, my environment, and my own efforts, right? 60 to even up to 75%. Actually, it looks more like 70. 60 to 70% of our happiness we can control. So I think that's very important to know, that there are limits. I think there's something else that's important too, that if you suffer from depression, and I know there are people in this room who suffer from depression because there's a certain percentage of us who suffer from depression. If you suffer from depression, one thing to remember is you shouldn't blame yourself. But certainly you can't blame yourself for this 30 or 40%. And don't blame your parents either, because they also inherited DNA, right? DNA is something we can't really control. So self-blame is not a useful emotion. Okay. So let's play science fact or science fiction. I'll just go through these quickly because we don't have a whole lot of time left. So what is responsible for our happiness? And there have been some movies done about this that are kind of fun. I wish I could show you some parts of these movies. So we were talking about the DNA of happiness, and 30 or 40% depends upon genetics, right? So is there one gene in the genome, is there one gene that we can identify with happiness? Because there has been a long time, a period of research on identifying the happiness gene. What do you think that the conclusion of this research was? Is there a happiness gene? How many think there's a happiness gene? How many think there's not a happiness gene? Right. That's science fiction. There's not just one happiness gene. There are thousands of our genes that contribute to our emotional well-being. So there's not just one, there are thousands. Okay, so write that down. Not just one, thousands. So in other words, genetic research probably will never be able to identify the particular genes that contribute to happiness or depression. Okay, second question, science fact or science fiction. Is there a part of the brain we could operate on? We could go in and do surgery and make people happier, a happiness lobe. By the way, how many lobes of the brain are there? The lobes, the sections. Do you know how many there are? There's 10. 10 lobes of the brain, okay? And different parts of the brain are responsible for different functions, even of our physical body, right? Our heartbeat and all, the physical things, seeing, hearing, thinking, right? So is there a lobe of the brain that we could operate on to make ourselves happier? Well, that's also science fiction. there are at least 7 parts of the brain that contribute to our emotions. So brain surgery is not going to solve the problem of unhappiness either. Okay, third one. Is there a happiness hormone? You know, we talk about hormones affecting our emotions, right? So certain hormones are stronger or weaker, higher level, lower level, depending on the part of the day. For women, depending on the part of the month, right? We have hormonal levels that are high or low. These can affect our moods, right? Our moods, our emotions. So is there one happiness happiness hormone? Again, this is science fiction. There's actually 4 hormones that contribute to happiness in different ways. I won't go through all of these, but you've probably heard of these different hormones before. Dopamine is the reward hormone when we do something that we accomplish something, or including hugging someone, it elevates dopamine. Eat something we enjoy elevates dopamine. Endorphins help us dealing with pain, overcoming pain. Oxytocin is related to love, feelings of love or anger. Serotonin is related to sleep. So all of these hormones contribute to our emotions, right? In a positive way, generally a positive way. And then there's one hormone, which is cortisol, that's a kind of a bad hormone for emotions. If cortisol levels are high, then we should try to reduce our cortisol because it makes us unhappy, stress. It's called the stress hormone because when we feel stress, our cortisol levels are higher. There's no pill to reduce cortisol, but there are things that we can do to lower our cortisol levels. Even sunshine reduces cortisol. But certainly other things, good sleep, meditation, thinking positive thoughts helps to reduce cortisol. My daughter, I've learned all of these things I'm talking about with you just over the last 10 or 20 years. But my daughter is a psychologist. She's 30 years old now, and she is a counselor. And recently, because of my work that I do, which is all about U.S.-Taiwan relations, and I work with the 2 governments a lot, and the money for our scholarships comes from the U.S. side, from AIT, and on the Taiwan side, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I work a lot with the 2 governments. And recently, in the U.S., the news from the U.S. government has been very upsetting to me. And I feel a lot of stress from it because it's going to have a bad impact on international education. I think it's okay for U.S. and Taiwan relations. I think we're okay. But it's not good for international education. So I've been very upset, and I wake up every morning and I look at my phone and read the news from the U.S., and I feel very stressed. And so I was telling my daughter this a few days ago, and she said, "Dad, don't do that. It raises your cortisol." So don't get up in the morning and read your phone every morning. Okay, so there are hormonal contributions to happiness, but hormonal supplements, there are pills for these. Don't take them. Don't take those hormone pills. They have a lot of undesirable side effects. The most important one, and you can buy these hormone supplements. but I don't think it's a good idea. The main reason is that your body naturally produces those hormones, naturally produces them. So if you produce them artificially with a pill, then your body doesn't produce them anymore. It compensates. So you become then dependent upon the hormone pills, which, cause stomach irritation, and they're not very useful. They're not very well produced. So my recommendation is to avoid those. Okay, finally, is there a happiness pill that we can take? Is there a drug that we can take to make ourselves happy? And again, this is science fiction. There is no safe happiness drug. It's true that certain illegal drugs can produce a feeling of happiness, such as cocaine or heroin. These drugs are very dangerous. Of course, they're illegal too, but they also are very temporary. The feeling of high is very short. And again, just like, actually similar to hormones, to maintain that good feeling, I need more and more of the drug. That's why people become addicted to heroin and cocaine, because to achieve the same level, they have to take more and more and more, which ultimately ends in death, and a very miserable death. However, antidepressants are appropriate with doctor's supervision. And if you suffer from depression, please see a psychologist who can prescribe the appropriate medicine for you. These medicines are very, very effective in controlling and managing your depression. Okay, so the questions I want to leave you with. We'll go back to a question earlier. Why do Olympic swimmers have long arms? First of all, I want to ask you two kind of hypothetical questions, and I think this is your homework or something like that. I'm curious what you would do. Let's pretend, or let's say, that we could buy happiness pills for $5 at 7-Eleven. And they've been scientifically tested and passed government regulatory approvals. We only need to take one pill a day, 30 minutes before breakfast, resulting in a feeling of lightness, joy, and comfort for 24 hours. There's no negative side effects in terms of your IQ or your attention, as long as you take this pill every day for the rest of your life. The world has an unlimited supply, so you don't have to worry about running out of it. So the first question I would have for you is, would you buy the pill? What would the benefits be of taking this pill every day? What are the dangers? Why would you take it? Why wouldn't you take it? What would it do to your creativity, to your understanding of yourself, to your identity, if you took the happiness pill every day? So mark yes or no on your sheet. And then the second question I would have is this one. Suppose that the government approved a chemical that the government could put into the drinking supply, the water supply, and would also, it's a supplement, an additive that would make people light, joyful, and pleasant. No negative side effects. And what if we held a vote? Should the water office mix ChemH into the country's water supply? Do you think that we should have this vote? And how would you vote for this? What are the benefits? What are the dangers? Why should the government supply us with happiness water, or why shouldn't it? How would you vote for happiness water? Okay, that concludes my lecture for today. The reason I asked you about the swimmer and the football players is that swimmers cannot create long arms. They're born with it, born with long arms, right? But those who choose to do so, who live in the right environment with the right encouragement, will dive into the water and they become strong swimmers. And they have an advantage over the other swimmers who were not born with long arms, right? But it doesn't mean that short-armed people shouldn't swim. They might not be in the Olympics, but they can still enjoy the joy of swimming. And what about the professional football players? Why is it that 2 times as many were born in January as born in December? It's because January 1st is the date in Europe that determines what year you are in school. So that means that people born in January, when they're in maybe the 4th grade of elementary school, are almost a year older than the kids born in December. And so they're a little bit taller, a little bit stronger, and they get the reward of doing better out on the football field. So in that case, their environment works with their birth to contribute to their success. So how can we use our birth in combination with our environment to achieve success in our lives? Ultimately, there are a lot of things that you can do to make yourselves happier. And knowing the science behind happiness can contribute to those things that you can do. Thank you.
好，我们谢谢Dr. Nadeau 给我们这个非常不一样的这个演讲哈。我们如同往常，我们有一些时间可以留下来给大家来提问。We use the Slido。大家可以用中文写中文也可以。所以有没有题目已经先出来的呢？还没有。好，我自己倒有一个问题想请教一下哈，就是有一些这个有一些这个 anxiety 或者这个 stress 是来自于这个没有办法承受这个冲击打击 frustration from the work from study 这种东西能不能被培养的？就是我从小是不是可以有什么样的经验能力，让他们能够比较习惯这种东西，那么因此接受到的这个negative 的这个 impact 比较不会 fall into depression.
Yeah. One very important thing to recognize is that we all suffer from stress. Stress is a natural response to conditions outside of our control, right? So the first thing that's very important is to train your mind not to self-blame for stress. This is, in psychology, the opposite of self-blame is self-compassion. We have to have compassion for ourselves when we're facing situations of stress. The second thing I would say is the best way to deal with stress is sometimes indirectly. Indirectly means, I talked about after you have a fight with your boyfriend, go touch a tree. This is a way to divert our attention and to interact with the outdoors or with nature. So sometimes the best way to deal with stress is not directly to address the problem, but to find some other distraction. This allows us to think more creatively about the problem. So the first advice is always try the indirect route and not the direct route.
So this can be learned. I mean, we should learn to cope with the stress, right?
Oh, if happy is a comparative thing. No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, the World Happiness Report identifies happiness levels, like Finland is the #1 happy country for the 8th year in a row. This is because there's a social network there that's very important, that makes people live a healthy life. So I'm not worried about that.
多巴胺、血清素。How do we increase those?
Yeah, there are natural ways to do that. Yeah, so avoid taking the pills that increase those. But all the things that I've been talking about raise both dopamine and serotonin. So in other words, all the things we talk about, like exercise, getting outdoors, sunshine, love for sure. I mean, having someone to touch. All these things raise both, so you both feel better and you sleep better. But try to find natural solutions to those. Thanks so much for having me in your class today. I enjoyed sharing with you.
Have a good week.